Hi there. Welcome to this week's episode of the podcast with me, Russell Davis. I've always been quite interested in improv comedy and how it works. So I threw myself out of my comfort zone and I signed up for an improv comedy workshop. And I loved it. And it's amazing how many lessons to life we can learn from improv comedy. So we're going to dive in now and help you maybe squeeze some more juice out of life by learning some of the principles from improv comedy. So don't worry, you don't just telling jokes or be funny, but it's inspiring to know what happens when you show up and just allow life to come, ideas to come. Let's dive in and find out what you can learn from improv comedy. I'm quite interested in improv comedy. I don't see myself as a particularly funny person, but there's something about improv comedy I think we can learn a lot about life from. And once we were on a kind of festival and there was an improv comedy workshop, and the idea of doing it partly terrified me, getting out of my comfort zone. It's always a good thing. But there was that interest of learning about life from it that really made me book on. So it's twofold. I knew I'd enjoy learning about improv comedy and how it teaches us about life, but also I knew it stretched me to have new experiences and get out of my comfort zone. And it was great. I absolutely loved it. Of course, the guy leading it was very funny. I had a great time and I got everything I wanted from it, and it did really reinforce some of these lessons for life, which I want to share with now. So with improv comedy, there may not be a script, but there are some principles that make it work. The principles that the actors have to adhere to make it work between them. And one of them is the idea of no blocking. So when an actor throws a line out, the other actors have to accept it and work with it. They can't block it and shut that idea down and go in a very different direction. They've got to take what they've been given and steer it in a direction, take it to the next stage. They've got to work with it. They can't ignore it or block it or throw it back. And it reminded me there's a therapist who's been a mental health nurse, and he can very much see this in mental health, and you can see it in other aspects of life. So he'd be on the unit, and some of these patients may have dementia and other mental health challenges, and they live in their own kind of version of reality. And he judged a lot of patients were sedated unnecessarily. So, for example, there was a time when he was trying to get the patients into their rooms. Also, the nurses were very busy, and one guy just wouldn't move in the corridor. He just wouldn't move, and he'd say, "I made a glass. Don't move me, I made a glass." Imagine if you're a very busy unit and the nurses are tired, need to get patients into their rooms, and it's very encouraging to say, "Cool, Mr. Smith, you're not made a glass. Come on, let's get into them." And trying to encourage them into their room, or even trying to move them if they think they made a glass, they're obviously going to kick off. Before you know, they might be sedated. But this therapist, who's a therapist now, is a nurse at the time, he accepted their reality, he didn't block it. He said, "Oh, you made a glass. Tell me about that." He wasn't buying into it. He was trying to understand, accept it. "Oh, I can understand. You're living in this unit, being monitored all the time. May feel like you made a glass." And he'd accepted and able then to steer it to another kind of more helpful place. There was one time a woman with dementia thought he was her late husband and said, "Oh, Joe, I'd love to see you." I went to go and give him a big hug and kiss. And goes, "That's not very professional in that kind of setting." So instead of saying, "No, I'm not your husband," which would kind of freak her out, he steered it to a sideways hug and said, "Okay, yes, dear. Yes, dear, let's go and get a cup of tea." Now, he didn't block her reality. He took it and steered it into a more helpful direction. I think it's an idea that we can accept more in life, particularly with children. Often adults block children and say, "No, can we go to the zoo this weekend?" "No, we can't." "Well, you want to go to the zoo? Tell me about that." "Yeah, I love going to the zoo." And just accepting their idea, then steer it to a more helpful direction of I'm afraid you can't go this weekend. I mean, what time this weekend? But perhaps we should book it in and do it in the summer holidays, and just rather than shutting down the idea, blocking it, accept it, and steer into a more helpful direction. Just being aware of blocking that often happens around us when we interact with others. Another one, kind of principle or lesson I learned from improv comedy, is when you can't think ahead. And we have a real habit of thinking ahead, and of course planning is a very useful tool, but planning, it's just an estimate, it's holding it lightly. Nothing can predict the future, not even our thinking, how much as we try, because we like to know we're going to be okay, we like to know our plan is going to be successful. We really think things through to make sure we are going to be okay, and that's all fear. That's fear and insecurity. One of the exercises in the workshop was just a word association game where we stand in a circle, a large circle, and someone says a word, and the next person to the right says a word associated with that, and it goes around the circle, around the group, and you can hear these words going around. It's coming closer to you, but you can't predict a word you're going to say. You can't think ahead because you never know. You never know what the person to your left is going to say. There might be a theme running, but it can change very quickly. So as much as you'd like to try and think ahead, you really can't. You've just got to wait to what that person says and see what comes to mind. And you see that people kind of who struggle with that, they were thinking too much. They were in their heads trying to work out what they should do even before it got to their turn, rather than just being in it and allowing the inspiration to come in the moment. And that's one of the mantras of the guy leading the workshop was to just show up and the comedy will follow. You may not think you're a funny person, doesn't matter. Just show up and the comedy will come. And it was interesting, and exactly kind of what happened. And in that kind of not thinking ahead about being present, there can be tension there. And I've talked in previous podcasts about creative tension. And I think there's that waiting for the inspiration, holding the tension. There's another exercise we did where we're standing in pairs opposite each other, and one person just had to start talking, and the other person just had to say something funny. And it came to the pair, my pair, and the woman I was kind of paired up with, and we did it in pairs. Everyone else could listen and listen in and watch. And she started talking, and I had nothing. I literally had nothing. And she carried on talking, and I started to panic a bit, thinking, I don't know what to say. I literally had nothing. And I had to just wait for inspiration. I just held the pose and just waited. And she was talking. And eventually the words came to mind was, I'm bored of listening to this. And it just seemed to work because clearly she was struggling a bit to fill the silence and it just seemed to work. And it was an example of holding the pose, holding the creative tension, and waiting for inspiration. Our ego doesn't like that tension. Our ego doesn't like feeling uncomfortable. But your wisdom knows you're going to be okay. Your wisdom knows it's okay to wait for that inspiration. And a moment of inspiration is worth hours of perspiration. A moment of inspiration is worth hours of perspiration. So just, waiting for inspiration, holding the pose. Your wisdom's got what you need. Our source of insights, clarity, solutions. Wait for the inspiration. Hold the pose. Don't go thinking ahead too much. You can't predict the future. The future is an incomplete equation by its very nature. Come back to the here and now. Hold your plan very lightly. And no blocking. Someone throws an idea out. Connect to it. Connect to them. Understand it. And steer it. It's almost like connecting becomes before education. Someone needs to feel heard and understood before they can accept a new reality, a different reality. Imagine the guy in the corridor once he felt, someone understands why I feel like I'm made of glass. He relaxed it and trusted that nurse and can move on to open himself to a new reality. When we block, we entrench them into their thinking, their belief system out of fear. And don't block yourself. Ideas come from a place of creativity. Don't keep blocking your thinking. Allow yourself the space to play with ideas, to be curious. So I think some of the lessons I think from improv comedy that I think are really valuable for life, to allow us to show up more fully and get the juice out of life, because comedy can only happen when we're fully present. So enjoy learning how you can bring more humour and lightness and peace and joy and flow into your life from those principles. Loving you.